Welcome to Drive the Daf, clear, structured explanation of the daily daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Maseches Sukkah Daf Yud Ches continues discussing various halachas in which you can halachically view a setup as forming a wall or forming a ceiling, forming schach, even if it's not actually there, and halacha is considered as if it is. First one will be analysis of the halacha of lavud. The Gemara will discuss how lavud works. Does it close the wall? Does it form actual kasher schach? And does it work in the middle of the sukkah or only near the walls? Then the Gemara will talk about the halacha of pi tikra, which is a halacha we've seen in Erevin, and ask if that applies to sukkah as well. Have a machlokes on the subject and try to compare it to the machlokes in Hilchos Erevin. So first of all, we're discussing the halacha of lavud. Lavud we know means is that anytime you have a space that's less than 3 tvachim is considered to be closed. Says Abaye, if you have a sukkah and there is a gap in the schach that's 3 tvachim or more, so it's a puzzle sukkah, a gap of 3 tvachim puzzles the sukkah, you can close the gap by putting in sticks. The sticks make the gap less than 3 tvachim, it divides it up into a few gaps smaller than 3 tvachim, and therefore it'll be considered lavud and closed. Now it says about you can even use pasal schach for that, because the sheer psul of pasal schach is 4 tvachim. So even if you view that closed gap as all pasal schach, it still becomes kosher, because the gap is, let's say, 3.5 tvachim. So if you close it with pasal schach, it's still considered to be closed. And now it's closed with pasal schach. It's not just an airspace. And pasal schach, less than 4 tvachim, is kosher. Now, says Abaye, though, if it's exactly 7 tvachim wide, the sukkah, then you need the lavud to make it into kosher schach. It's not enough to make it into closed gap. You need to have 7 tvachim of kosher schach. So there, if you have a 3 tefach wide space, you have to fill it in with kosher schach. You fill it in with kosher schach, it's all viewed as being a kosher schach. You have 7 tvachim, it's fine. If you fill it with pasal schach, you won't have 7 tvachim of kosher schach, you'll have 7 tvachim closed, but not 7 tvachim of kosher schach, and therefore that will be a psul. Now, this is all lavud. Says the Gemara, the machlokes if it works in the middle of a sukkah. If it works on the side of the sukkah is what we've been discussing so far. In the middle of a sukkah, that's a machlokes between Rav Acha and Ravina. The Gemara doesn't say who says what. One says it works, one says it does not work. What's a machlokes about? It says machlokes is, do you learn the halachas of lavud from Erevin or do you learn it from Tumah? According to the one who says that lavud works in the middle of a sukkah, it works for 2 ends of schach to meet each other. So he learns out of Erevin. The halacha in Erevin is that you have to have a beam across the entrance to a mavoi to consider the mavoi permitted to carry within. Now what if you have 2 beams coming out of each side of the mavoi and they meet just short of each other? Or, for that matter, if you have a beam coming out of one side and it meets short of the other side. So you say lavud. Whether the gap is on the side or the gap is in the middle, you still say lavud. So this, according to the Mani Amar, that you say lavud in the middle of a sukkah, he learns from here. You say lavud in the middle of a sukkah. And the other one says you can't learn from Erevin. Erevin's a din, they're rabbanon. The rabbanon made a requirement for a beam, so they made soft halachas. Sukkah is a daraisa issue. You have to have lavud daraisa. You have to have the halacha l'moshe Sinai qualifications of how lavud works. In the rules there are that it has to be on the side, the gap. It cannot be in the middle. Okay, so the Gemara says, what is the logic of the other one? So the logic of the one, it says, if you look at the halachas of tumah, if you have a gap in a ceiling, that's 1 tefach. By 1 tefach, it's considered to be a gap. How does that play out? Let's say you have a skylight, a hole in the ceiling that's 1 tefach square. So the halacha is that that's not considered roofed. If you have tumah in the rest of the house, it's metame anything else in the rest of the house, but it's not metame anything that's under the skylight. And if you have tumah that's under the skylight, it's not metame anything in the house. It's considered to be separate. We do not view that as being closed. So you see that 1 tefach is not considered closed if it's in the middle of the roof. So too in the sukkah, you don't say lavud to close the space. What does the other one hold? The other one says, well, that's a special halacha of tumah. Tumah, we know, has a special halacha. There, the rule is that it's 1 tefach square counts as a separate rishus. That's a special halacha mashmisina we have for tumah. You cannot apply that to anywhere else. The Gemara now quotes a malacha said by Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai, which his Talmidim asked him to specify. First of which refers to the halacha of the Daif and Akuma. So Yehuda Bar Ilai said if you have a house and the middle of the house fell in and now you have a space there, you fill it in with schach, it's kosher. Everything is okay. So Rabbi Shmuel Bar Ilai said, Rabbi, please explain. Please provide details here, because my father explained that it's only if the rest of the ceiling is only 4 amas, so that you only have a space of pasal schach of less than 4 amas, that is, from the kosher schach to the wall. That way you have the Daif and Akuma halacha. Otherwise, you don't have a way to kasher this. Now, Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai said another halacha. He said that a little fish called an avruma is a kosher fish, and you're allowed to eat it. Now, the concern there is that it's so small that when you scoop it up out of the water, you get shratzim. You get all kinds of water bugs along with it, and it's impossible sometimes to eat one without the other. But Yehuda Bar Ilai said it's okay, you're allowed to eat it. So Shmuel Bar Ilai again said, please specify. My father said it depends which river you're fishing in. In some rivers it's kosher, in some rivers it's not. Like Abai explained further, and he said that in the Bub, the river called Bub, over there it's permitted. In other rivers, not necessarily. So the Gemara said, what's the reason? So the Gemara said, well, maybe the reason is because the current there is swift, and other shratzim, the bugs, don't have a spine, and therefore they can't hold themselves in the water, and when you fish out this fish, they'll be swept away. The Gemara says it's not true, because we can see that they do manage to hold themselves in the water. So the Gemara said, well, maybe it's because it's a saltwater river, and these fish can't survive in the salt water, these non-kosher creatures. Gemara said, no, it's not true, because we can see that they do survive. Gemara said, no, the reason is that the earth, the floor of this river, does not lend itself to the development of so many shratzim. So you don't have so many shratzim there, and you can separate the kosher fish from the non-kosher fish. Other rivers do have shratzim. So Gemara says, Ravina said that now the Eitan River and the Gemada River both pour into the Bub, and therefore it will have a lot of these non-kosher fish in there, and you won't be able to separate the two, and therefore you should not eat the fish from there, because you'll end up eating shratzim along with it. Okay, now the Gemara discusses the halacha of pi tikra. The halacha of pi tikra is that if you have a ceiling, the edge of the ceiling is viewed as a wall. That is, the edge of the ceiling is viewed as if it extends downward and forms a wall closing off whatever is under the ceiling. So Gemara says the discussion here is an achsadra. An achsadra is a area that has a roof and no walls, like a portico. So Gemara discusses a situation where you have a chutzner that has achsadras all around it and it's open in the middle. So Gemara says that achsadra, if you put schach over the middle open area, so we had already seen that if the achsadra roof is less than 4 amas, then you could use the walls of the houses as walls, but if it's more than 4 amas, you can't. So Gemara here is discussing where you can't use the walls of the houses. I guess the situation would be that the achsadra roofs are more than 4 amas. It says Gemara, if you have walls set up at the edges of the achsadra near the open area, so that now forms the wall of the sukkah, that would be kosher. What if you don't have those walls? So Gemara says the machlokes between Abai and Rava. Abai says no walls. You have just schach without walls. That's a pasal sukkah, obviously. Abai says no. The walls, the ceiling of the achsadra forms pitikra, and pitikra could work to kosher the sukkah. Now you have a kosher sukkah using pitikra on all 4 sides. So Gemara says, so Rava asked him, so then it should be enough if you just have 2 walls in a sukkah. Why? Because you have 2 walls across from each other and a beam running across from one wall to the other on one end, and that beam is a tefach wide, so that's it, it's a roof, and that the edge of that tefach wide beam could form a pitikra, close it on the 3rd side, and you have 3 walls, so everything's okay. Said Abai, no, I agree that in that situation would not be a kosher sukkah, and the reason is that it's people just walk straight through. You have 2 walls across from each other, it's a malvim mufulish, it's a highway. People walk through there, you can't view it as a sukkah if it's a through street for everybody to walk through. Now we want to compare this machlokes Abai and Rava to a very similar machlokes between Rava and Shmuel and Hilchos Eruvin. Machlokes there is where you have an achsadra that's not in a chutzner, it's not surrounded by walls, there's no walls around at all. It's just a roof without any walls. It's held up by 4 posts in the corners. So Rav says you're allowed to carry within it. Shmuel says you're not allowed to carry within it So what's the machlokas there? Rav says pitikra. Shmuel says you don't say pitikra. That will be the same as this machlokas here. So Gemara says no, not necessarily. That situation is more of a pitikra than this is, and therefore it could be a hold of pitikra there, but not here. Why so? How is that? Because over there, the roof of the achsadra is meant to serve the space under the achsadra. So therefore, the pitikra, the edge of that, closes it off. I say pitikra that it closes it off. In our situation, the roof is meant to serve outside the sukkah. The achsadra is the non-roofed part. We need walls for the sukkah. That's where there's no roof. So there, to say that the walls of to say that the ceiling of the achsadra serves as a wall for the space that's not enclosed in the achsadra, that's much harder to say. So therefore, it could be that even though Shmuel says, therefore it could be that even though Rav says in the case of the achsadra in Hilchos Shabbos, that there he says you do say pitikra, it could be that here he will say you won't say pitikra, and he could agree to Rava.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.